The skies over Ukraine have turned into a battlefield of fire and steel. In one of the largest aerial assaults since the invasion began, Russia launched a staggering 298 drones and 69 missiles, killing civilians including children, while Kyiv's defenses struggled under the onslaught. Amid the devastation, a rare glimmer of diplomacy, a historic 1,000 for 1,000 prisoner swap, even as Moscow announces new gains in Donetsk. But President Zelensky's warning echoes louder than the explosions. America's silence emboldens Putin. With the West's response fractured, Trump's statements, the EU scrambling for tougher sanctions. I'm Hani Saif, and this is Think Tank.
Our world is becoming unhinged.
Welcome back. The New York Times has reported that considering fading diplomatic efforts and the apparent withdrawal of U.S. engagement, Russia has dramatically escalated its military campaign against Ukraine, intensifying airstrikes on civilian and strategic targets. This shift reflects Moscow's intent to exploit perceived Western disengagement and tilt the war in its favor. The American newspaper added that despite Trump's verbal condemnation of Russian attacks, his administration has withheld new military aid, leaving Ukraine increasingly vulnerable. Analysts warn that Washington's reluctance to support Kyiv emboldens Moscow as Ukrainian defenses strain under relentless bombardment and dwindling resources. With no ceasefire in sight and Russia advancing in eastern Ukraine, experts caution a prolonged and bloody conflict. Without sustained Western support, Ukraine faces a grim reality. Survival hinges not on miracles, but on weapons, willpower, and international resolve. And according to the Kyiv Independent, the Netherlands has affirmed its support for Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's participation in the upcoming NATO summit in The Hague, signaling European solidarity amid U.S. hesitations. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans emphasized Ukraine's importance despite reports of American reluctance over the format of his involvement. As NATO prepares for a delicate summit under new leadership, divisions emerge over how to address Ukraine's future and counter Russian narratives. While past summits prominently featured Kyiv, this year's agenda may downplay direct references to avoid internal discord. Amid shifting dynamics, allies plan to boost defense spending dramatically and strengthen military production. Yet, without clear consensus on Ukraine's path forward, the summit faces challenges in balancing unity, strategy, and political sensitivities. For now, the skies over Ukraine remain battlegrounds. As Kyiv burns and global silence lingers, questions mount. Is the world's inaction fueling Russia's actions?
In the dead of night, Ukraine faced its largest aerial assault since the war began. Over 300 missiles and drones targeting civilians, infrastructure, and hope itself. But as Kyiv burns, the world's response has been definitely quiet. Is global silence, especially from Washington, encouraging Russians to move forward? The numbers are staggering. 22 regions hit, energy grids crippled, and many are dead. Russia's strategy? Saturate Ukraine's air defenses with decoy drones, then strike with ballistic missiles. Despite intercepting 70%, Ukraine's systems are buckling under the strain. Zelensky said that America's silence encourages Putin. We need action, not words. Behind the violence, a diplomatic collapse. The Istanbul talks failed after Moscow rejected the ceasefire, demanding Ukraine cede occupied territories. Analysts say Putin uses escalation as leverage while testing Western resolve. But behind the explosions lies a deeper battle. Europe's response? New sanctions on Russia's oil smuggling. But with the US refusing to join under Trump, NATO's unity frays, Poland's leaders openly clash over Ukraine's membership bid. Washington's inaction speaks volumes. Trump's refusal to impose sanctions has allies questioning US commitment and Putin sensing opportunity. Meanwhile, a record 1,000 for 1,000 POW swap hints at fragile humanitarian channels. As weapons talk, so does the world, or doesn't? This war is no longer just about Ukraine. It's a litmus test for global security. As Kyiv wakes to another day of war, one question lingers. Will the world finally speak louder than the missiles?
And to look deeper in this file, we are joined by from Kiev by Mr. Oleksiy Melnyk, the former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, and from Moscow by Mr. Alexander Zazipkin, the former Russian diplomat. Gentlemen, welcome to Think Tank. Mr. Melnyk, given Russia's largest aerial assault yet, how is Ukraine managing to sustain its air defenses amid the dwindling Western support?
Hello, and thank you for inviting me. Yes, indeed, Ukraine has huge problem with Russian air attacks. Most of these attacks are targeted on civilian infrastructure, big cities like Kyiv, and of course there is a shortage of air defense systems and interceptors. But even if Ukraine had 10 times more of those systems, there is still no 100% guarantee. So the solution, or partly, it can be increasing number of air defense systems, but the real solution is to persuade Russia to stop this bloody war, to stop violating international rules, conducting international war crimes. Because otherwise it's not going to end anytime soon.
Mr. Zazipkin, with Moscow launching over 300 drones and missiles at Ukrainian cities, is Russia now openly prioritizing total attrition over negotiation? Mr. Zazipkin, now with Moscow launching over 300 drones and missiles at Ukrainian cities, is Russia now openly prioritizing the total attrition over negotiations?
Okay. Ultimately, as for us, the horizons of development in the situation, I see in the meantime the negotiation is proposed with Ukraine, and mostly it is clear what is expected and from such a negotiation. An idea of a statement was proposed. They record the goals of the settlement and a roadmap for the settlement. This all in the beginning of the first phase. Has this course is going to be progressed or developed? We do not actually know yet. But by the two delegations, the Ukrainian and the Russian, spoke positively following the first round of negotiation, but the course for the end of negotiation is very long, and maybe today that is some sort of an optimism. As what's happening actually, that the continuation of fights, as each party has its own goal, but the Russian army is progressing, that has capabilities in striking in multiple fronts, and from the other hand, it is a continued advance in multiple directions. In the meantime, there is some sort of an outline, meaning to establish of taking an urgent resolution, but the issues might affect the South in total. In totally, we're talking about the military campaign in the summer, as also we see some sort of military actions by Ukraine, and there are a serious attempt to attack into the Russian target, which is some sort of expected, and as threatened by the Ukrainian army, I mean Russia. Therefore, what we are watching today is intensifying the escalation fight. It could be in a first phase for a bigger escalation within the upcoming months.
Mr. Melnik, now with US silence interpreted as tacit approval of Russian actions, how can Kiev rally global solidarity in this critical moment?
Kyiv can do little to persuade President Trump to do more or to be more proactive. Because at the end of the day, as we see, it makes every remark, every critical remark from Kyiv make President Trump angry, and he doesn't want to listen. If we talk about other European partners of Ukraine, there have been a number of statements, very good, strong statements, but unfortunately not such strong actions. And here we have a number of reasons for that. First, Europe actually doesn't have enough resources to support or to replace American military support, first of all. And second, there is also problems with unity, as you mentioned in your introduction, with the Euro-Atlantic unity. And this is the reality. And in this situation, everyone should understand, especially those who are pushing Ukraine for concessions that Ukraine cannot accept, that Ukraine does not have many choices. Because if for Russia this is the war of choice, for Ukraine this is the war of existence, and Ukraine doesn't have, as I said, many choices but to keep fighting, even if at a certain moment there will be no American support.
We will be talking more about the European stance regarding Ukraine, but Mr. Zazepkin, does the prisoner exchange indicate a humanitarian pause, or is it merely a tactical move to buy more time on the battlefield? Can you hear me, sir? Mr. Zasebkin, does the prisoner exchange indicate a humanitarian pause, or is it merely a tactical move to buy more time on the battleground?
I do not have the logic of this question to who's going to gain the time. The exchange of prisoners was expected and it is natural, and we hoped that such exchange, as they have a very clear objective, as based on the humanitarian matters, for the youth are returned to their families, and there is no political dimension as such, but we're talking about the bigger objectives with regard to the settlement. Such objectives are well known and should be achieved, and the Russian stance is well known. But with respect to the steps of exchanging prisoners, most importantly, that did not achieve any political gain. So that's why I'm wondering why this question.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Milnik, how does the historic 1,000 for 1,000 prisoner swap reflect any potential shift towards diplomacy despite the ongoing escalation?
Let me remind you that President Trump, when he first launched his peace initiatives, demanded that there would be unconditional ceasefire and exchange all for all. And as we see for the moment, there is no unconditional ceasefire. Russia actually puts unlimited number of preconditions to declare ceasefire, which is against the idea of unconditional ceasefire. And the same about the prisoners exchange. As we know well, Russia cares very little about its own people. And now, when I looked at Russian social networks, there are a lot of criticism. They don't treat their soldiers as citizens. They don't welcome them back home. They treat most of them as betrayers. So in Russian culture, they were supposed to kill themselves instead of surrender. So that means that one of the main reasons, or the main reason of this prisoners exchange, is to show President Trump that Russia is interested in some peace initiatives. Completely different situation on the Ukrainian side, because Ukraine is fighting for every citizen, either in uniform or civilians. And you may also notice that among those so-called POWs, there were hundreds of civilians that were taken hostages by Russian occupying forces during the first day of the war. So for Russia, this is just a human traffic. This has nothing to do with morale, has nothing to do with any good gesture or making peace.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Zasebkin, as the West imposes new sanctions on Russia's oil fleet, how is Moscow countering these measures while sustaining its war efforts?
We, as always, against the politicization of the issue of sanctions, and we've had enough of more sanctions. In the meantime, we are wishing to agree with the Americans to lift sanctions, but not in the account of accepting the political preconditions that they are regarding with the settlement on the Ukrainian landscape. Each one should know and realize their interests of cooperation and we are pursuing this with the Americans, and yet with the European, it is a non-starter. Europe is now is fully supporting as they are components of the enemy camp, and with no sign to regain the relation with Europe in the near future. And more than that, the statement and the deeds of Europeans lately indicated that they are directed with a direct confrontation with Russia, and we do not wish this to happen. But this behavior is very dangerous for the rulers of Europe, and we consider this is a political craziness that is relying of Russia phobia, and they found, along with the Ukrainians, that based on that basis, some sort of a cooperation among them, and received thousands of Russians. But now the issue of sanctions with respect to the Russia and Europe isn't non-starter, but with respect to it is possible in reaching solutions that are based on benefits.
Mr. Milnik, Putin announced territorial advances in Donetsk. How prepared really is Ukraine to withstand a prolonged war without new military aid?
This is a very important question. First, about Putin's announcements. He has announced probably 10 times during the last 12 months that Russia wants to create a so-called buffer zone, 50 kilometers or 30 kilometers wide along the Russian-Ukrainian international border. But as we see for the moment, this task failed. So Putin is eager to occupy more territories. He declares his big plans and intentions, and the big question whether Russia is able to do any significant breakthrough on the front line. Russian offensive operation, current ongoing offensive operation, actually started in October 2023. So it's been already more than 18 months. And during these 18 months, Russia has made continuous but very little progress at the very high cost. There are some estimates like 150 Russian soldiers killed for every square kilometers of Ukrainian land. So this is not the way to win the war. But since the current stage of the war is the war of attrition, Russia actually is aiming at achieving the situation when Ukraine would not be able to sustain defense anymore without, and to persuade actually European partners, other Western partners, to cut off support for Ukraine because according to Russia's narratives, Russia is winning and there is a waste of time and lives and money to support Ukraine because Russia will win the war at the end of the day, which is not for certain, of course. And now Ukrainian forces, despite being outnumbered, outgunned, actually from the very first day of the war, they still maintain the front line. Mm-hmm. They still buy time for territories. And this is the tactics that Ukraine has been doing quite successfully. It's also not a success, but as I said, this is not the defeat.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Oleksiy Milnik, the former Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister, and Mr. Alexander Zazepkin, the former Russian diplomat. Gentlemen, thank you both for your special insights and for this valuable discussion. Now, the Russia-Ukraine war enters a dangerous new phase. Skies ablaze, diplomacy is strained, and global unity is tested. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode of Think Tank. I'm Henny Saif. Thank you for joining us.